Nigel, welcome. I will give you that.
Thank you.
We will perch here. Can we just double check the acoustics at the back? Holly, can you hear us at the back here?
Hello, hello.
Yeah, you can definitely hear that. I'll try not to shout too much. I want to start with the big one, Nigel, which is this. How does AI think?
Gosh, that's
the whole book, I know.
the whole book.
Yeah, then we can go. Yeah.
So, language is an interesting thing. Language is actually a method of encoding that we use to transfer information. So a word like think is, you would hope, a very concise description of something that, and when I say think to you, you would have the same understanding of the word think as I have of the word think. But certain words like think or intelligence are very poorly defined terms and are actually quite, not very precise in the way that you would use that to actually describe, how does AI think? And the reality is it's very, very complicated because even the word think, we would all come up with different descriptions of what think is. The bottom line of it is, sorry to spoil the plot, by the way, your description, I love your description, did make it sound very inaccessible though. And complicated.
Oh, it's not that.
But hopefully it's very accessible. And the idea here is that, it doesn't think in the way that we think. Our thinking is rather more complex and beyond what we would even describe as thinking. And so one of the examples I use in the book is playing tennis. So you think of tennis as being just something you do, but it actually requires an awful lot of intelligence, to judge the ball. Maybe you're playing somebody who's pretty good at tennis, they'll serve the ball at 50 miles an hour, it takes about a second for the ball to cross the net. You've got to work out the spin, where it's going to land, what position to be in, what shot you're going to use to return it with, to send it down the line and win the point. And University of Lucerne, home of Roger Federer, did a whole bunch of research on this. Amateur players' reaction times are just the same as the professionals. The professionals aren't any faster. What the professionals are is more intelligent. The professionals are better at understanding that flight of the ball, the effect of the spin, what the bounce is. They have better algorithms loaded to be able to return the shot, to be more accurate. And the big thing is they do that all completely subconsciously. They don't think about it in the way that we would describe thinking as being this very, thing that we do when we're playing chess or a cryptic crossword. I'm not very good at cryptic crosswords, can't spell.
It's almost intuitive.
Yeah, so it's a subconscious intelligence. And as I described to my boys when they were learning to drive, I said, you are going to start off consciously incompetent. Hopefully, by the time you sit your test, you will be consciously competent and good enough to pass your test. And then very soon after, you will become subconsciously competent, and that's when you're going to crash. And sure enough, the first one wrote his car off in 6 months. But it's that idea that a lot of what your brain is doing isn't actual conscious thought. The conscious thought is a tiny piece of it. It's most of what we're doing is subconscious. Most of the decisions we make are subconscious. And we were just having this conversation at the back. Most of the decisions you make, you don't have anywhere near enough information to make those decisions. You are guessing. Most of what you do is guessing. And again, we're sort of, we're being filmed, aren't we? I'm sure I can tell this story. I was at Windsor Castle, as one is from time to time, speaking to a member of the royal family and describing what I was doing, and they, I don't like that, don't trust it, don't understand it. And, it kind of struck me as, well, that's a bit sad, you should learn about it, so maybe I should write a book to describe this. And so I said, so when you made that decision to marry your beautiful wife and spend the rest of your life with her, did you have all the information that you needed? Do you know how you made that decision? Or was it a bit of a guess? he said, well, you're getting a bit personal now.
I'm surprised you got out, actually.
But, you know, it's that, these are the way we live our life. You know, we're thinking, but we don't have all the information. We can't necessarily, and that's the difference between a deterministic computer program that step by step does exactly what it says on the tin versus AI, where you're learning from information.
There's a choice phrase which I think you borrowed from someone else, which is a stochastic parrot. We're in that phase with AI at the moment that it basically marshals relatively random information and just parrots it back out.
So what the large language models that, you know, maybe if you use ChatGPT or one of these programs does, is it is basically trying to guess the next word in the sequence. Or the image generation is basically guessing the next pixel to draw. It is making that decision based on huge amounts of information. It's making that on, you know, a very complex model that it has built up of how language and semantic understanding of language, different phraseologies, you know, and it's using all of that information to basically predict what's the next word in the sentence. So you tell it to write a nursery rhyme for your children, using the characters that your child likes about something that you think will entertain your child. And it will write this amazing story, you know, because it's seen a lot of nursery rhymes. It sort of knows how stories go together. It's learnt. We have told it. It hasn't learnt. We have told it how to learn to understand and build this semantic understanding of language. And it uses that understanding to then predict the next word in a sentence to ultimately build a story that you go, gosh, that's pretty good.
One of the underlying themes of the book, it seems to me, is that human intelligence, thinking, consciousness, understanding is inherently much more complicated than anything AI currently, at least, is capable of, and that AI is a different way of thinking as opposed to one which somehow threatens human thinking.
Yeah, I think the AI methods at the moment are still pretty inefficient. But just the scale of the AI models is small. You know, your brain probably has about 100 trillion parameters, as does everybody else in the room. We're all actually quite the same. The best, like GPT-4 is about 1.7 trillion parameters. So we're still quite a bit better, but probably the difference is, take, like, I don't know how to use this description. Take the word apple. To a computer, apple is 4 letters, 2 of which are repeated. It knows nothing about what an apple is. Whereas to you, an apple is this thing that you can hold in your hand, you know the weight of it, you know what it looks like, you know different types of apples, you know what they taste like, you know the sound they make when you bite into it. So, you know, the amount of context that you have around the word apple is massive compared to the contextual understanding that an AI system has, which is why today they're very inefficient. Because most of what they're doing is they're turning data into information. You know, data is just letters. Information is context associated with those letters. Those letters in that combination with the word apple, and here's all this other information I know about Apple, and then when I talk about apples, you know, and maybe Newton, I can kind of get that those two things might go together in some strange way.
Yeah, and our minds are running down those neural pathways, those associations all the time in a way that, and I'm not trying to posit this as either or of human intelligence versus AI, but some of the critique or rather perhaps fear of AI is the belief that somehow it is going to take over human activity, human thinking. We'll come on to that in a moment, but I want to ask you one point, which I'd like you to unpack this. This is so a point you made later in the book. I've come to understand that energy, information, communication, and intelligence are all intimately related. Perhaps you could unpack that and explain what it means for the development of AI, at least potentially.
So, if you think about life on our planet, it exists because there is energy. It exists because the sun's rays fall on the planet. So, for example, there is a tree that I can see from the study in my house. I can see the tree because light photons have come from the sun on a journey of 150 million miles, taken 8 minutes to get there. They have combined with that tree. Some of them have bounced off and have hit my photoreceptors in my eyes, which are basically just neurons that receive light information. That information has then gone to my brain through synaptic connections, and through the knowledge model that I've built up, I'm able to recognize a tree. So light and energy has made the tree exist. Light allows me to see the tree, to create the connections, to create, those connections then drive knowledge and understanding and allow me to build intelligence. And there's this wonderful, why it's the second law of thermodynamics, to me it's far more important. The second law of thermodynamics that basically says everything's trying to kind of go back to some very basic state, and we need energy to kind of maintain its form and its existence, and you need communication to do the same. Your cells in your body are communicating with each other to know, oh, that's a cell in my skin, or that's a cell in my kidneys, to know how they should be working together to actually make your body work. So your body is a combination of communications. And we think that that's all very special and we're very unique. But I'm not picking on you particularly, Greg.
Do, pick away.
But you probably share nearly 50% of your DNA with a cabbage.
Got me in one. Oh, how about you? Are you cabbage-esque?
Yeah, everyone is.
All right.
We're all roughly 50, because we all come from this original cell that split and grew to create all these different biological forms. And we're all connected. In a way, we think of ourselves as being different and unique, and all the rest of it. Humans are like 2% difference in DNA.
I've got a hunch that whatever you're going to hear tonight, that concept that you are 50% of you share with DNA with a cabbage is probably going to be an enduring image. Let's come on to this. Come to the book itself as a book. Much of media, much of creativity is essentially purposive. That the author, creator, writer wants something to happen as a result of their efforts. What do you want or hope to happen as a result of people reading How AI Thinks?
So I'm not sure I've fully formed it in the book, and as time has gone on, I've sort of probably all fully formed this, and we were talking about this a bit earlier at dinner as well. A lot of automation, all the way back to the Industrial Revolution, was automation of tasks. And automation of tasks is trying to replace a human with a machine to do some repeatable thing. And that typically transfers wealth from the person who, the skilled weaver becomes replaced by an unskilled person using a weaving machine. And the wealth goes to the owner of the mill rather than to the mill workers. And that's automation of a task. And AI can do that. And a lot of people are focused on trying to get AI to do that. But probably what's far more interesting is if you could augment humans using AI, help humans to become more skilled at things that they're not necessarily, fully skilled at. And then those people become better or capable and become more valuable humans. So can we somehow use AI to make 8 billion people better versus 8 billionaires richer, as somebody told me the other day, and I thought this is a great phrase, so I've stolen it. But it's that idea that can people understand about AI? Because AI is not here to replace us. AI is here to augment us, and if we can understand about it and understand how we want to be able to think about using it to augment our skills, then maybe we can get better, and maybe we can help other people to benefit from AI. So the more people who can understand about AI and understand its limitations, what it could do, how we might be able to use it, then that's really what I would like to help people understand.
Yeah, and speaking personally, absolutely that is the case. Through having read this, there is such insight. But there's also such prompts to thinking, and genuinely, I found myself thinking differently as a result of reading aspects of this book. One of your phrases, and this is reasonably late on in the book, we must ensure that AI is used as a force for good. How?
In so many ways, right? Health. It will help us solve problems in health that we couldn't solve without them. In one way, AI is a bit like a piece of paper and a pencil. You don't solve a complicated maths problem. I'm not sure how many people in this room solve complicated maths problems, but anyway, if you were, you wouldn't try and do it all in your head. You'd get a piece of paper out, a pencil, and you'd sit down and you'd try and use the paper to go outside of your brain to try and think about what the answer was. And AI is basically the same. It's a way to extend your human capacity to think more and solve problems that you couldn't previously think. Maybe understand how DNA and RNA combine with proteins to build cell structures and how cells work together. And then if I bring a molecule to that cell, it will connect particularly with the protein in just the right way that I can then attach a drug to that molecule and it will deliver the drug to the cell to kill the cancer, no side effects. And AI potentially allows us to understand those very complex relationships and how they might work to solve that kind of problem. In education, thinking about, there's been some studies done where people who have a tutor, a personal tutor, will get 2 or 3 grades better in a subject, given a good tutor. The problem is, how do you get enough tutors? Richer people can hire a tutor for their child to kind of get better in the exams and get into a different school, and hopefully that's good enough for a period. So a short burst of tutoring will maybe get people to pass exams a bit better. But how do you make that available to everybody, including in sub-Saharan Africa, where less than 50% of the population even leave school knowing how to read and write? So can we use AI to create personal tutors that will help people to build skills and basic skills even in reading and writing and mathematics so that they can become useful humans in a technological world, and then also allow people to move forward throughout their life and continue to learn and train. So education potentially can be changed dramatically. Probably China, actually, interestingly, is furthest ahead in this and how they're using AI to drive education. We're way behind.
We'll come back to education in a bit, because you've got an observation about the 3 C's rather than the 3 R's I'd like to explore. But I just want to come to a point about how we as human beings might be changed by AI in this respect. How will it change the way that we might think and act? If, for example, if AI does all the heavy lifting of garnering information, of marshalling it, might that make decision-making much more deterministic, much less based on free will, because it's a sequence of logical outcomes? AI steers us to an ineluctably logical world, which, as humankind, we are messy, intuitive, gut feeling, make it up as you go along and so on. Do you think there is a prospect it will change the way that we actually think?
So most of the problems you're trying to solve, there is not a definite answer to. So most of what you are trying to do is a probabilistic judgment. You will make better probabilistic judgments when you have more information. And so an AI that has access to more information will hopefully help you make a better decision. But Aristotle talks about these 2 things of extrapolation and interpolation, technical terms. Interpolation is when you know some things and in the middle of it, is something you don't quite know, but it's somewhere between these 2 points, so I can make a reasonably good guess that this thing is related to that. Your television, for example, interpolates. It doesn't receive enough information over the transmission to actually fire up all the pixels on your very, very high resolution TV. And so what the TV does is it works out the pixels in the middle, what color they should be and what shade, what level of intensity they should be, because it's interpolating that missing piece of information to make the screen look better than the information would necessarily suggest it should be. The problem is when you are extrapolating. So when you're extrapolating, you've gone beyond the bounds of what you currently know, you're guessing. So there's Columbus heading off across the Atlantic to visit these continents across the seas, and they have no clue what's there, and they're making stuff up about what might be there and thinking, oh, I'll get to the East Indies, not, and they're just completely wrong because they're extrapolated, because they have no points of reference to be able to understand that. And so the risk is, if we can use AI to interpolate, we can probably make better predictions. If we're using AI to do extrapolation, it'll probably be just as bad as us. So we need to be careful how we apply it. And this is one of the dangerous things about this thing people call artificial general intelligence. First of all, I don't know what that is, and I work in AI. It seems to be that we can make things that know everything, but nothing can know everything. And the big problem is, some of the leading thinkers in AI, people like Jeff Hinton, who came up with some of these ideas and approaches around AI. Chap over there looks just like Jeff Hinton, by the way. They talk about this thing called the alignment problem. Can we tell AI to follow a process which is aligned with what we expected the answer to be? Now, I come from semiconductors, and in semiconductors you have to make a chip and it has to work. So we don't call it an alignment problem, we call it a verification problem. And the only way you solve the verification problem is if you've got enough information about what you want the thing to do. If you don't know what you want it to do, you can't come up with a test to test that it will actually do it properly. So we need to think about how AI gets applied to problems that we can understand, and we can keep it within some bounds of doing the things that we want it to do, but we can actually then verify it, because otherwise it will be extrapolating and it will probably come up with wrong answers. So this is all to do with how we might be able to control AI and keep it under our control. But it's not the machine that's at fault, it's the humans.
The people. Again, we'll come on to that if we may. I think that's almost the crux of the matter. And this is purely anecdotal. This is not a data point. This is not logical structure. If you mention AI to people, whether it's at the Royal House of Windsor or whatever, or just conversationally, nearly always the response will be negative, fearful. Now, you'll slightly roll your eyes thinking, well, in my world, there's people who absolutely, deeply, passionately see the upside. But I just want to explore that fear point. Are we too defensive, even fearful about AI? And I just want to make a comparison point. If you think of the almost the hysteria that there is over AI, there's just even a thing about the apparent doctored photograph of the royal family yesterday. Apparently that was AI as well. Everything leads that way. Compare that, the psyche around that, with, say, the extraordinary optimism that there was in the 60s about the space race, and for, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 decades after that, technologically there was always something newer, bigger, better, more exciting, and so on, and technology was exciting. Whereas now, maybe because we are fearful about, I don't know, the planet, we've realized we've rather burnt the planet, there's conspiracy theories all over the place, whatever it might be, we've had COVID, financial impact, etc. This is a bad time to have a game changer come into our lives, and so we're fearing it. We're fear of the new.
But this has been happening forever. The fear has been there forever, certainly since the Industrial Revolution. So you look at Frankenstein, Mary Shelley's, Mary Shelley Wollstonecraft's book.
Written in Bath, by the way.
Well, written in Bath, but it comes from stories that were told on a very bad summer, sitting on Lake Garda with thunderstorms raging over the hills. And the only thing they had to do was to drink and to tell stories to each other. Mary Wollstonecraft came up with these stories about a creature that would be made by humans to replace humans, and it all comes from the Luddites of that era, where people were worried about machines replacing them. To the point where the humans would become redundant. So that fear exists, and it really comes back to a very human aspect. Children will naturally, when they see an object, they'll often reach out to touch it to see whether it reacts to them. Is it real? If I poke this, does it run away? And it's a very, very natural attitude of the human to do that. And sometimes it'll be a grandmother who's, will smile and they'll get a reaction from doing it, and then they'll repeat it. They'll repeat that action. If you give your children feedback, they'll react to it, and they will learn from it. And it's this thing that inherent inside us is this idea of, is it animism, is it alive, or is it artificialism? Is it an object that we control? And so the clue's in the name, right? AI is artificial. We control it. We've made it. It is not an animal. It is not of its. It's not outside of our control. But it also goes back, to 14,000 years ago, if I get my dates right, to the first person who came back to the cave with a grey wolf and said, I'm going to teach this wolf to help me hunt. And somebody said, oh, no, it's going to take my job. And somebody else said, it's going to eat me. Or somebody else said, it's going to eat all our food. They were scared of the idea of this. But that's where domesticated dogs came from, derived from that strain of grey wolves that now all of our dogs that we have in our homes, comes from. And it's a very natural reaction that people have to these things. The difference is AI isn't here to replace us, it's here to help us. So how do we kind of get our head around that and think about how we're going to use it for good, how we're going to use it to help us and not to replace us, and not to, again, some of these tech luminaries are a bit mad sometimes.
Good. I think almost as a metaphor, but in that territory, you tell the story of how VisiCalc was created and the fear. Explain the fear of it, that it would put accountants out of jobs, but what it actually did as a consequence.
Well, yeah, that's a very natural reaction, isn't it? We think of often, automation will kill jobs. It will, completely replace them. What often happens is it partially replaces, and in some cases makes our jobs easier, makes our jobs better. So off the top of my head, I forget the name. Chap sitting in Harvard Business School, watching somebody on a chalkboard writing out a spreadsheet and rubbing out the numbers and getting his calculator out and filling in the numbers. Do you know that's why pencils used to have rubbers on the top of them to do spreadsheets? That's why pencils always were shipped with rubbers on the top, so people could rub out the calculations in a spreadsheet. And he thought, well, these PCs, these personal computers have come out, the Apple II. Surely we could use a personal computer to do these spreadsheets. People were starting to do it on mainframes as well. But we could give spreadsheets and the ability to just recalculate a whole spreadsheet to anybody with a personal computer. And now there's like 700 million people that use spreadsheets, and accountants are no longer sort of back office people. There's a few in the room, probably around here. They're no longer back office people. They are, part of the business process, and they're using these tools to do scenarios, and it's really enhanced the work of people. And that often happens with technology. You don't fully replace people. You actually can enhance. And it's back to this idea of, are we automating a task, or are we augmenting a process or an outcome?
Yeah, it struck me as a very clear way to make that point about how technology, yes, changes, but actually enables. And give or take, and of course there's a huge range here, give or take, that is what AI, that's in part the thesis of this, that AI will be that augmenter, that enhancer.
But it will also, it's not going to benefit everybody, right? People are going to be retrained. So a friend of mine, ended up running AT&T, one of the big US telecom companies, and they employed 300,000 people, huge number of people, because they're all across America, all the networks, everything. And they realized that a lot of those jobs were going to go as they automated and they changed the way the networks were run. And so rather than thinking, okay, we're going to get rid of all those people, we're going to hire new people with new skills, they said, we're going to retrain these people. So you had, 40-year-old people going off to universities to learn new courses, all funded by AT&T. They actually started to retrain their people for the kinds of jobs that they needed. They created their next talent force from the people that they already had. And so this idea of, how can we make sure that AI helps us kind of educate people throughout their lives? Education shouldn't just be this sheep dip thing that you do for a period of time and then forget it all once you dry off. It needs to be something that you do throughout your life and continue to learn throughout your life.
Yeah. We're going to break for questions in a moment, but I'm going to ask you, Nigel, to read a little part of this, which is about some intelligent machines, which is the beginning of your chapter 2. Chapter 2. So if I could highlight that.
I don't have my glasses, so
I'll
try and remember it.
Would you care to borrow some glasses?
No,
Not
fine.
inappropriate, but sorry. Before that, would you like a cup of coffee or something, or a glass of wine?
Okay.
No? All right.
So yeah, it's probably a bit of a shock in terms of, let me give you a preview to this chapter. I was never meant to write a book. I'm dyslexic. So at school, I struggled with English. I was, always struggled in the English class, never the A student in English. I remember one teacher once giving me some marking on my homework, and they said, "Your homework is a bit like a spider who is dying, crawling across the page, leaving an incomprehensible set of marks on the page," which I found very motivating, by the way. So I was never meant to write a book, and I became interested in computers and what they can do, and I was interested in numbers, and these use different numbers and things, and I was fascinated by these clever machines, but that couldn't read and write either. So that really sort of got my interest in computers, and so one of the things that sort of falls out of that is this year, round about 150 new intelligent machines are going to be delivered. Now, these intelligent machines will end up in companies and will end up helping companies, but will actually end up probably running companies. They'll end up in governments, these intelligent machines, and they'll be helping governments, and eventually they will run governments. They'll become as intelligent as you, more intelligent than you. They will beat every single one of our current sporting champions, these intelligent machines. And you need to hope that as you later, in the next few years, that these intelligent machines are going to be in control. So you better hope they're going to look after you. So we call them children. These children are intelligent machines. You're an intelligent machine. We're now learning how to build computers to be more like intelligent, but they're here to make us more intelligent.